John, I'm going to step away from the mic. I believe you can start when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Good morning, folks. I'd like to call the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda is roll call. So, what I'm not sure about, are we doing a roll call of all board members or just committee members, or both?
John, this is Sandy. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, you're Sandy.
Please call your committee members first and then ask for whoever else is present from the board who is participating in the meeting, so we know if there are other board members that intend to participate.
Okay, so roll call of my committee members. Ann Orgoric.
Here.
Stephanie.
Here.
Jessica.
Here. Here.
Okay, so my committee members are all on. Any additional board members?
Hi, good morning, John. It's Michelle Smiak, present.
Hi, John. Jerry DeLon's on the call.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can see you, Lori.
Good.
All right, if that's all the board members that are on the call, thank you for joining us this morning. First item on the agenda is the approval of the February 18th minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved. This is Ann.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any corrections to the minutes? Seeing no corrections to the minutes, all in favor, aye, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Hi.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Next is, I guess, is Amy Silverman's on the call, right?
I am.
Okay. Good morning, Amy. I guess you're going to give us an update on next transit long-range planning.
I am. I actually think we have the slides swapped though, so I think Breen is going to go first, but do we have the slide deck up, Jeffrey?
All yours, Breen.
We are not seeing the slide deck, I don't believe. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. So sorry.
Yeah, so I'm sorry about the agenda switch, John. We're going to switch. Breen's going to start with discussion of the arts policy this morning, and then I'll provide an update on the long-range plan.
Okay, you know it's not nice to confuse John Tagg.
My apologies. It was my fault. I was concerned about childcare drop-off and being here right smack at 8:30. So
That's okay. So I guess, Breen, you're up.
I guess so. Good morning, everyone. I'm Breen Masiotra. I'm the manager of transit-oriented communities here at Port Authority, and I'm going to be talking today about art policy. By way of background, in about 2015, my team started researching and working on the development of an art policy for the agency because we were seeing a lot of requests to the organization, and there was not a process in place for fielding those. And it has taken quite a while for us to get to finalization, but here we are, and we're really excited about that. When we developed this policy, both when we started and even more recently, we coordinated with the Office of Public Art, which is a partnership between the City of Pittsburgh and the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, and is the sort of foremost local expertise on public art. And we, at the time, the airport was in the process of developing their policy, which of course, I'm sure most of you have seen the outcome of in terms of some beautiful work out there. And we used that as a model for this policy. So I'm going to run through some basics of why we're doing this and then what it entails. Each of my slides includes a photograph of art, which I will also point out the context for, because I think it's helpful to understand what we have done and what we hope to do with regard to art itself. So our art policy defines art as a creative expression by a third-party artist presented in media visual form. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see a composite photo of 13 geometric figures, which is a installation by Solowit commissioned by Port Authority in 1984. Next slide, please. The reason that reasons that we hope to pursue and steward art as an agency is because it improves the customer experience, encourages ridership, improves the perception of transit, enhances community livability, deters vandalism, and increases safety and security. These are all pretty self-explanatory and all things that align with the goals that we've been talking about as an agency. The images on the right-hand side here, not a Port Authority-owned property, but this Agnes R. Katz Plaza, built in 1998, is both a public space, public art, as well as a bus stop. And you can see in the inset on the lower right, a bus and folks getting on or off a bus at this location. I've heard from folks from out of town that this might be one of the most beautiful bus stops in the country because it's got this amazing public space amenity as part and parcel of where folks are waiting for our vehicles. Next slide, please. Why do we want an art policy? It's really helpful, particularly as a public entity, to set expectations internally and externally for the review, consideration, and approval of adding or removing art on agency policy or property. And this policy will do that for us so that we know exactly how to proceed with both, again, stewarding our existing art and considering opportunities for new art. Next slide, please. Oh, and I guess I forgot to talk about the art in that last photo, or on that last slide. That was Romar Bearden's Pittsburgh Recollections, also commissioned by Port Authority in 1984 as part of the original light rail development. Next slide, please. So when we have a policy in place, there will be a need for some program management related to public art. And the policy outlines some roles, responsibilities, and talks about, and then allows for guidelines that will cover things at a more detailed level. And I walk through all of that. The image on this slide is a series of murals commissioned by the city of Pittsburgh. There were 4 murals completed by 4 artists in these cordoned off spaces on Broadway Avenue and Beachview. These projects were completed in 2020. Next slide, please. So the policy calls for a staff member designated to oversee public art efforts, as well as a committee to provide expert guidance on art-related matters. So that will allow us to have staff capacity to ensure that the things we're committing to are occurring, but also to not put the burden on staff to be experts about public art, but to create a resource for that expertise. Apologies if you're hearing background noise, the garbage truck is on my street at the moment.
Hey, Breen, is that committee, is that made up of just Port Authority employees, or is it different? I'm not sure if you said that or not.
I didn't go into the detail of it. It is a combination of folks. So there are some Port Authority staff and there's some external expertise, including the Office of Public Art.
Thank you.
Yep. This photo, or image rather, is a rendering of possible public art at Negley Station that was generated by our Negley Station station area plan completed in 2018. Next slide, please. So the policy also sets expectations that Port Authority and artists will meet in the stewardship of existing art and the creation and implementation of new art, as well as it includes some helpful terms that frame issues such as, establish requirements really around things such as ownership, insurance, safety, media, etc. So it helps to sort of define, what our sort of requirements are as we consider and work with art going forward. The image on this slide is a rendering of some public art that we are considering at Station Square Station. This is where the light rail sort of heads eastward from the station up toward the Panhandle Bridge. And there's a mural proposed along the concrete wall there. Next slide, please. So this policy is an umbrella under which Port Authority will administratively issue guidelines regarding the solicitation and implementation of permanent art, temporary art, and guidelines around deaccessioning, which is a word I know most people are not familiar with, but it very simply means the removal of art, and it provides the guideline, the framework in which we would make a decision about such removal. The image on this slide is a rendering of possible public art at Dormont Junction. This is on a concrete wall that is essentially the side of the Mount Lebanon Transit Tunnel. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, but also it's my duty to turn it over to David for the resolution.
A question, I guess, a couple questions I have. Are there any committee members that have questions of Breen?
Breen, I do real quick. Breen, do you guys have already identified locations where you're willing to consider art?
So yes, in terms of the ones I've just shown you, those would be the places where we have thought about art in the context of larger improvement work and planning work that we've undertaken. Beyond that, we have not identified specific locations. And again, I didn't get into the weeds of it because we could talk about this for probably hours, but the guidelines that are shown on this slide allow for the permanent art guidelines allow a process by which we can solicit artists. So these murals would occur under that guideline. The temporary art guidelines allow for folks to approach us and for us to consider those proposals. So that also allows for, if we have not, if we don't have things in the pipeline where we're looking to implement, we could still consider opportunities that come to us.
Okay, thank you.
The question I have is, are we going to pay any of the artists?
That's a great question. And our policy doesn't, I don't think, and Mike, you can help me if I don't remember, we have 4 documents that are part of this, so every detail is not in my brain. But that would certainly be my goal and my intention. It's the right thing to do. It is a service and a product, and we pay for every other design service that we use as an agency. So I don't see why not. But Mike, if you have anything to add.
Sure, Breen. I would just add, much like Breen said, I think particularly under the permanent guidelines, which if the board does adopt this policy, we would be issuing administratively. It contemplates solicitations where we would be paying to acquire the artwork. I think on the temporary artwork side, it's probably going to be a mixed bag because there's a process contemplated in there for folks requesting to put artwork on our property on a temporary basis. I think in those situations, it would probably be at no cost, with the consideration being us granting the permission to install the temporary artwork on our property.
And one last question, then. Is there and concerns about any legal jeopardy, because the expression goes, art is in the eyes of the beholder, and I'm concerned, even back to our policy about advertising on buses. So I have a concern about that. Can you address that at all, either Sandy or you, Mike?
Sure. A couple things on the legal front, Mr. Tague. One, the way that the policy and the guidelines are set up, they do contemplate releases from the artist, so that we own the artwork and we have the ability to move it or deaccession it, as that policy is referred to. And on the content side, we do have certain content viewpoint neutral, which is very critical from a legal perspective, content restrictions contemplated in the art guidelines in the policy that mirror the basic content prohibitions we have in our existing advertising policy.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any questions of board members?
Sure. I have a question. Does art work as it relates to the murals encourage, in your experience, graffiti? And if so, who's responsible for removing it and replacing the original art?
So the research on this topic shows that murals actually discourage graffiti. It's a blank canvas that tends to attract tagging as opposed to a piece of art. It's just, you know, you're sort of, if there's a varied background, your work doesn't show up quite the same way. So that's you know, based on experience and research, that is the prevailing sort of position on what's actually one of the benefits of murals, is that they can help to discourage it. In terms of maintenance, the stewardship of the art is primarily Port Authority's responsibility. Again, as Mike said, if it's a permanent piece, we own it. It's our responsibility to maintain it, and if we choose, remove it. And so to the extent that that's feasible, it would be, you know, to the tools that we have being effective, it would be our primary responsibility. We could also choose to, as part of a contract with an artist on permanent art, specify how we would work with them if maintenance was required, or we could recontract with them if we chose to, in order to make improvements or updates necessary from wear or damage.
Any additional questions from board members? Seeing none, are there any questions from any stakeholder groups that are on the call? Okay, seeing no additional questions, I guess you're up, David. By the way, David Huffaker does a great job on this stuff.
That's an inside joke. Thank you, Mr. Tague.
That was from our earlier conversation.
So thank you, Mr. Tague, and thank you, Breen, for the overview of the art program. There have been a few questions, but I would respectfully ask that the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee consider a do-pass recommendation to the board to adopt this proposed art policy effective April 1st, 2021. However, if you do have further questions, we'd be happy to address them as they arise. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to accept the policy, art policy?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, or no, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, David. And anything else? And then I guess, are you ready for us, Amy?
Yes. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Silberman. I'm the Director of Planning. I'm going to provide a brief update on Next Transit, our long-range plan. I'm going to be pretty brief this morning, as several of you have been able to join us in our recent round of public meetings, which we thank you for. It's great to see board members at those. But just to provide a brief update of where we are right now, we pushed out last month publicly a list of potential policies, programs, and projects to perhaps include in the final long-range plan. So these lists have come out of 9 or so months of both behind the scenes and public engagement work. This is now our 4th round of public engagement for this project. Initially, we assumed that most of the projects on the list would be sort of map-based projects focusing on corridors and transit hubs for future places for us to invest in infrastructure. However, lots of ideas came out of this process that are not necessarily the types of projects that can fit on a map. So I just wanted to provide a really brief intro into a couple of those. There are about 20 or so of them, and they're all on the project's website at nexttransit.network. And there is currently a survey out asking the public to give us input on which of these types of policies and programs sound important to them or not important to them. So one example is a sidewalk program. One of the things we've heard most loudly and most often throughout this planning process is just about the difficulties for folks, especially outside of the city of Pittsburgh area in some of the newer communities, or at least not 100-year-old communities, where the sidewalk network is either non-existent or not complete or in disrepair. So the idea here is perhaps some sort of program where Port Authority could actually partner with municipalities to help prioritize missing connections in the sidewalk network, just as a way to help people more safely and accessibly get to and from bus stops. Another example of one of these non-map based projects is looking at vehicle amenities and design in a bit more detail. So we do have some of this that happens sort of organically internally, but fleshing this out into more of a full-blown program to make sure that we are talking about and then procuring and designing vehicles that allow people to bring their lives on board transit. So we heard from lots of people who want to go to the airport but have luggage racks on those buses. We heard from people who want to keep their sleeping babies in their strollers open on vehicles. People who are headed home from the grocery store and need a safer place to store those goods so that they aren't juggling them around a lot of other people while riding. So thinking about those sorts of improvements that can help us system-wide to better serve our customers no matter what their needs are. And then teeing us up for more discussions about fares today, we continue to hear from people who want more places to purchase their fares. So that could be, you're seeing here on the slide, a ticket vending machine. That could also be some of our mobile app work that is continuing to roll out into further pilot phases. That could be additional retail locations where people can buy their fares, etc. So as I mentioned, there are about 20 of them. They sort of span a very broad array of different ideas. We're asking for the public to provide us input on those at this point. On the next slide, we have the map. So this is a proposed map. Next slide, please. Thank you. Of future corridors where we might consider investing in infrastructure. There's a lot going on the map. Many of you have heard about the map already or have been able to participate in one of our public or stakeholder meetings. So I'm not going to go through it in great detail today. But I just want everyone to know that it is out there. It is on the website. On the website, this map is broken into 5 different sections of the county, north, south, east, west, and sort of the central area, which is most of the city of Pittsburgh. And so on those surveys, sort of a scrolling based survey, and gives a little bit more information about each project as you move through, and then asks members of the community if it's an important project to them, or they're neutral on it, or it's not important to them. But for the most part, these are places where we might invest in physical infrastructure. The sort of heaviest proposed infrastructure corridors on this map are shown in green. We're calling new high capacity transit. For the most part, a specific type of transit vehicle or mode is not yet determined. There are a few nuances to that, but broadly speaking, at this point, we're just looking for, did we get the lines right on the map, and which of these lines, which of these connections is most important to our community? And then also a lot of points. Most of those points are circles. Those are transit hubs, and there are also a few other sort of nuanced projects on there, such as proposed additional stations on our existing rapid transit lines, etc. Moving along to the next slide, this is a summary of what has happened over the last 4 weeks, excuse me. So we kicked off this theme 4 of public engagement 4 weeks ago. We started with 4 public meetings. We also have since attended 11 meetings of other stakeholders organizations. So that could include private corporations, not-for-profit groups, community development organizations. And so it's been really great that everyone's been inviting us into their meetings. It's still continuing to be a challenging time to hear representatively from our community. So that's really important. We've had over 600 people at those 15 total meetings, so we really feel like we've been able to talk to a broad swath of our community. And then we've also got probably about 700 now survey responses to our online survey. We also early last week put all of the surveys in paper form at our downtown customer service center. And then this week we have 10 bus shelters around the system are getting survey boxes and paper surveys as well. And those are specifically in areas where we are both seeing less online engagement, perhaps because the community is less connected online, and also seeing significant transit ridership. So places where we likely also have more essential workers. So those are going out this week, and those will be up for another 3 weeks through early April, so that we can make sure that the feedback on this phase is representative of our community.
Hey, Amy, are there any groups that we have missed or have come up afterwards? I mean, obviously getting to every individual would be impossible, but are there things that we found that were missing that we had to pick up on?
In terms of the meetings that we have scheduled, I actually feel like we have a really diverse group of organizations. So we have non-for-profits, we have community development organizations, we have advocacy groups, we have private corporations, some of the larger employers that we'll be meeting with or have met with. So I think we're doing a pretty good job in terms of just trying to have a diverse set of people in the room that we're talking to. We certainly, on an individual level, we're seeing missing zip codes, pretty early on in the online survey rollout, which we knew and expected. So we were planning to roll out the bus stop locations. We waited a couple weeks so that we could really confirm where we wanted to put those survey boxes in at bus shelters. And so we do have, pretty good, that was sort of our planned pivot, was to wait. Let's make sure we confirm that the places we're not hearing from are the places we think we won't hear from quite as representatively, and then roll those paper boxes out that way. So we'll continue to pivot as the paper surveys come in as well. And if we still feel like we have significant gaps, the project is flexible and we can continue to look to ways to increase participation.
Thank you. It sounds like you have a plan for this, which is great. Thank you.
Yes, certainly been a learning experience for all of us over the last year with regard to public engagement during the pandemic. But we also are going to have some tent locations going up as well. We did that in the fall. 2 rounds of public engagement ago. We will be doing that again the last week in March and the first week in April. We will have the little Next Transit tents up also at some higher transit ridership locations, so that people who maybe don't feel comfortable or aren't able to, walk all the way through a written survey and read all of that, someone can actually facilitate and help them move through the survey that way.
Great.
So we have a few more stakeholder meetings and the tents coming up in March and early April, and then we are going to spend the month of April focusing on project cost and benefit analysis. That includes things like ridership projections for projects that are seemingly higher priority, and then we will establish an initial prioritization of these policies, programs, and projects, and then roll out more public engagement on that initial prioritization. And then beyond that, our hope is over the summer to have a draft plan available, and then to finalize that plan at the end of the summer. So that is all from me. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions of committee members? Any questions of other board members that are on the call?
I would just like to make a comment. The public engagement has been very impressive, and encourage you guys to continue the great work. we all know the pivot has been challenging, but you guys have done a great job doing so. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Stephanie. The one question I had, we've been talking about sidewalks for decades. I mean, this is not a new conversation about sidewalks in municipalities, some of the conditions of them. So I'm interested in how that's going to actually work out, because a lot of it comes down to who has money to do what. And a lot of municipalities don't have the money to even maintain their sidewalks. So it is a question about how the Port Authority is going to interact with our municipalities to do, especially around our transit stop. But what I hear a lot of people have to walk up the road to get to a bus stop because there's no sidewalk at all. And as you said, Amy, there's a lot of municipalities don't even have sidewalks, and some of the ones that do are in bad shape. Pittsburgh, by and large, are not too bad, but there's some areas even in Pittsburgh that need to be looked at. Anyways, just to comment on the sidewalks, are there any stakeholder groups that have any questions of Amy? Okay, seeing no questions, then thank you very much.
John, I have one more question. Amy, whenever you guys are invited to attend some of the stakeholder meetings by invitation, if you could let me know, I'll be more than happy to assist as well.
Great. We can send you the list. We've got probably one every day for a while, so we'll let you know.
Hey, Stephanie, watch what you ask for.
Oh my, no problem.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, Amy, very much. And thank you, David and Breen, for your presentations. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Meeting stands in adjournment until our April meeting. Thank you very much for everybody that joined the call today. So I guess, Michelle, you're next. Or no, Ann's next.
It's me. Hold on. Let me pull up my agenda here. Okay, I will call to order the Finance Committee for March 18th, 2021. Our first item on the agenda is a roll call of our members. Do I have member Liptak? Okay. How about member DeLon?
Morning, Ann.
Morning. Okay, any other board members? Just identify yourselves.
John Tagg.
Stephanie Turner.
Michelle Smianek. Oh, sorry, Stephanie. Michelle.
Lori Miskorsky, I'm still on.
Thanks.
Just the ball's bell.
Thank you. Okay, our first order of business is approval of minutes from the February 18th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second. And any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Our next agenda item is a review of the fair policy update. Catherine.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members and members of the public who are attending with us today. It is my pleasure to present an update on updates to our fare structure and our fare policy. As the board and committee members may remember, at the very end of 2018, the board authorized staff to engage in negotiations to retain 49's technology for a comprehensive review of our existing fare structure and our fare policy, to point out some best practices and give senior staff the ability to look at the data out there so we could come up with some recommendations and bring them back out to our community to get their feedback. 2019, November 2019, we received the first internal deep dive presentation from 49's, giving us a bunch of options to look at. And our intent had been to roll in the work of 4-9s with the Next Transit outreach. So the first 5 Next Transit meetings, which were in person, had a component in the second part that talked about where would people like to see fare technology going? Where would they like to see fare payment? What were their recommendations? What were their pain points? What was their comfort level? And then, of course, we had the pandemic hit and we changed our feedback for Next Transit. So we are at the point that we are now 2 years after having started this process, but we have not had what we would normally look at as a big, robust involvement process on fare technology. So the question is, do we stop and then wait for a long process, or do we try to proceed with things which we have heard back in various ways from a bunch of constituent groups that we have some improvements available, take those out, get consensus these are good, and then after the pandemic, have a different conversation on fares. So as we go through this presentation, you will see that staff's recommendation is to let us go forward for the outreach and involvement process on things that can reduce fares and reduce the impact immediately. So let's go to the next slide if we can. So what was it that we had heard coming into the fare process? So definitely in my first year, we heard a lot of discussion on transfers. As a reminder, Port Authority is one of the few transit agencies in the country that still charges for a transfer. We heard a lot about the cumbersome nature of some of our passes. It was hard to renew them. We also heard conversations about folks wanting to pay with their phone, increasing options for folks who are paying cash, and what were the things we could look at. So what we narrowed down our review was how to eliminate transfers and make it easier for people to ride in a way that made sense to them. Could we introduce rolling passes? We'll talk about that in a second. We also went over UPass and school programs pricing. 3 of our local universities are in the UPass program, and we want to expand that so all the universities and additionally secondary schools can participate and lessen some of that burden for transportation. We also asked for best practices in the following areas. We wanted to see what our peers were doing for low-income fare programs, specifically what kind of partnerships they were in for funding this, or did they have dedicated funding sources which require these programs. We wanted to see what our friends were doing on bulk passes. So did employers purchase access for everybody or just purchase access on certain passes? How did conventions work? And we also wanted special events information. Do we see our friends are mailing out a Connect band with access for 16 passes along with a Steelers pass? I don't know. We wanted to get that information. Next slide, please. So broadly, our recommendations are the following. On the Connect card, get rid of the transfer and discontinue the stored value discount. So when a pass holder taps their Connect card, they pay $275 and they can now ride for 3 hours. Now, previously our transfer had a 3-hour window because that's the length of our longest trip. In 4-9's analysis, they saw that the vast majority, well over 90% of our patrons travel in 3-hour blocks. Very few people are traveling in 3-hour blocks. So we see a 3-hour at one point, a 3-hour later, or maybe just a 3-hour to get into and out of downtown. So this covers the majority of our trips. It gets rid of the transfer, and you can go wherever you want in 3 hours. You no longer would face a situation that you tap your card, you pay, you get on with the transfer, you pay, and then if your travel is done within 2 hours, let's say you're going to the grocery store and you have a transfer, that you then pay again. All this could be accomplished in that $2.75. Again, this does get rid of the discount for the Connect card usage. We had introduced that 25-cent discount to incentivize folks moving over to the Connect card. What we saw pre-pandemic was nearly 92% of our patrons are using a pass or another prepaid mechanism, so that discount has accomplished the point of moving folks over. And in exchange for that 25 cents, they now will have that 3-hour access. Just touching on other things in our fare process, we wanted to make sure that what we're taking forward for your consideration today are long-term durable solutions. So we're in this weird pinch point that the pandemic is winding down, but it's still impacting people's lives. So we still don't know how this is going to go forward for the rest of the year. We've been very fortunate in support for CARES funding, but we still don't know what the future looks like. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we implement is sustainable for the agency, but that people could make plans based on this, that they would have a useful fare media that will be useful today, but they know it'll be set next year and the year after that as well. The other recommendation that we're bringing to you is rolling passes. Currently, a patron will purchase a monthly pass. So today is March 18th. If I want to buy a pass today, I can buy a pass for April and figure it out for the next 12 days. Or can I even buy an April pass yet, Pete? It's the 18th.
Yeah.
You can buy an April pass today. But if you are in March and you need assistance for March, you cannot still buy a March pass. Or if you did buy it, you would be paying the full face value of nearly $100. Same thing with weekly passes. They go live on a Monday and then they expire at the end of Sunday night. If you don't get paid on Monday, Port Authority gets paid on a Wednesday. There's those 2 days that you are not going to be able to use a pass that you purchased on a weekly pass. If you are a student or you're getting your military retirement or you're on any other measured income that doesn't miraculously show up for you by the 31st or the end of the month, you now have to decide, do you wait a few days to get your pass? What are you going to do? It also generates a lot of overtime and backlog for our pass procedures because everyone is trying to get in or accomplish your transaction at the last few days of the month and the first few days of the next month. Obviously, being easy for us is not the main consideration. And according to our marketing and communications group, implementing rolling passes on the the weekly and monthly pass is one of our most requested improvements for fair media. So again, your nutshell, and we'll walk through more information, discontinue the transfer, change the Connect card tap to $275, and that buys a 3-hour unlimited use pass, and then convert our weekly and monthly passes to a rolling pass. So let me walk through a little bit more information, then we can get into questions. Next slide, please. So why a 3-hour pass? Again, we had looked at, what was the use of people that were taking this? How often were people using the transfer? How was this impacting what people were doing? And we've heard very loud and clear, especially in our BRT conversation, that as we look forward to improving transfers for folks, that's useless if somebody still has to pay a transfer. In fact, as recently as our last next transit round, folks in Uptown were saying, hey, if I have to pay a transfer, going to the grocery store is still going to cost me $7. Theoretically, under this, going to the grocery store could cost you $2.75. We also looked at the impact of folks who are transferring and who are not transferring. The transfers have a disproportionate impact on our low-income riders and our riders of color, looking at our historic data. So it's an equity improvement. It brings us to a more equitable system, and it's the right thing to do. Next slide, please. Again, in transfers in fiscal 2019, so we're in this place where our analysis is good up through March 13th of last year. In fiscal 19, paid transfer generated about $2 million. But if we can start encouraging folks to take transfers, then we can change our service in a way which is more responsive to them, and that can help us with some operational offset. Again, if we know that transfers are disproportionately used by low income and people of color, we're also in the position that we have something which is balancing the budget on the back of the people who can least afford it. And it's not industry best practice. So other reasons why we're looking forward to discontinuing that. I know this is large enough for everybody to read, and I do apologize for that. The top line in the peachy color is showing our current status quo of what the pricing is and about what the revenue income is per annual. Option 2 shows you what we're proposing with the change to the tap and getting rid of a transfer. And again, it looks like about a decrease, what we're seeing on our ridership now, about $1.02 million, so about 1% of the budget. Next slide. This is just another way to lay out the differences on what the pricing structure is. So again, it discontinues the stored value discount on a Connect card, gets rid of the transfer for the folks who are using the Connect card. Now, some Title VI considerations. Other than us doing our due diligence to make sure we're not impacting anyone negatively, we are required per FTA regulation to conduct a Title VI policy analysis. This requires us to look for inadvertent impacts of our policy that might impact low-income populations or populations of color. A good example of this is when new vehicles come into a transit agency, they might not get rotated to some of the busiest routes pre-Title VI because the supposition is, well, that's going to wear them down quickly. That's what the bus is there for. Or other issues we might have seen in the past were shelter placements. Maybe shelters in a high usage area weren't replaced as quickly because they would wear down. that is a disproportionate impact. So when we look at Title VI, it's not just how people are paying. We look at Title VI considerations on fair service and delivery. So right now our planning department is very focused on how our passenger capacity limits, which we have for COVID safety reasons, how are they impacting all of our routes, but especially our routes in low income and minority neighborhoods. We rotate our buses around throughout garages to make sure that we are not inadvertently sending a certain type of bus to a certain neighborhood. It's helping us do our job properly. So what does Title VI show us on the fare changes? Again, when we're looking at the transfers, that they were disproportionately impacting low-income and minority riders. Next slide, please. We also have a Title VI impact that we see that the use of cash is higher amongst our low-income and our populations of color. Low-income is not surprising. Not having a bank account, not having access to a ticket vending machine really close to you, these are things which are going to impact folks, and they will not have the ability to do a Connect card. They'd still be paying cash at $275. Next slide, please. So the final part on Title VI, getting rid of the cash discount, I keep saying cash discount, getting rid of the stored value discount addresses from an equity perspective that folks are paying more, they're much closer to paying the same thing for their trip. Rolling passes, just a little bit more information. Again, they provide much greater flexibility for customers in purchasing. It's a very popular request from customers. And what we have right now is workforce, when they order passes, they order a boatload to coin an expression of monthly passes. They send back passes at the end of the month that are unused. A bulk purchase could buy 100 passes, and if 10 are left over, they can use them for the next month. Now, what you see here is a disadvantage for fare capping, and we'll talk a little bit about that. When I came on board, one of the issues we talked about was fare capping. This idea that if you were using a stored value card, that once you capped out at the price of a day pass, you could convert over. And once you bought enough day passes in a week, you could convert over to a weekly pass, same thing going toward a monthly pass. So we had dug into what we were trying to accomplish with fare capping, was making passes more affordable, and it was giving people flexibility to be able to get passes when it made sense for them. Given that fare capping becomes much more difficult for us with rolling passes, we've had to make the decision to recommend to you rolling passes because we think it accomplishes broadly the goals of what we wanted to get from fare capping. So between getting rid of the transfers and now giving people the opportunity to travel throughout the day in what looks like their travel patterns for essentially $550, two of these 275 taps, that is still lower than a day pass, and that looks like it captures well over 90% of our trips. Rolling passes have the same consideration. Folks are able to buy a pass when they can. They're able to implement it when they can. So for instance, if you can buy a pass on the 10th, but you don't really need to use it until the 15th, that pass goes live at the time that you want it to go live. You can buy a daily pass on a Wednesday when you get paid by Port Authority, and you don't need to use it until you feel like you can. So in our analysis, the concerns that we had that we wanted to address with fare capping seem to be met with our rolling passes and the implementation of eliminating the transfer and adding a 3-hour pass. Next slide, please. So what are our recommendations and next steps? We would like the Finance Committee to recommend to the board consideration to go out for public comment. Per FT regulations, we will hold a public hearing to get input on this. So our policies require the board give us permission to call a public hearing. Now, what does that mean for us? It means that from the time that we say the public hearing starts, we have to have the hearing no sooner than 3 weeks. What we plan to do from a staff perspective is, if the board gives us approval, is next Friday, March 26th, go live on our website with detailed information about what's being proposed and some backup information. We are wrapping up the process of scheduling our virtual meetings, so 5 to 6 Zoom meetings where folks can log on, see what's going on, get information. We're also reaching out to our community partners to make sure that they have posters or information that they can share, so folks who can't get to a Zoom meeting have easy options to access information. We are also, we will put information in our downtown service center so folks can walk in, see what's proposed, and give us their feedback. And we're adding drop boxes throughout the service area, still resolving those recommendations to get feedback. Tentatively, we would collect comment from March 26th through May 5th and hold the public hearing on May 5th. Then combine all the comments we've received and come back to the Finance Committee in May with our final recommendations to seek board approval in the end of May. Now, things that are in flux here. We may go out that first portion of April and hear from folks who want a broader conversation. We may hear from people that the meetings we have and the outreach that we're proposing is not broad enough for them, for their communities to reach into us, and that will cause us to push out our outreach. We are still confirming with our ticket vending machine vendor, Scheiden Bachman, how quickly they can reprogram our ticket vending machines to accommodate rolling passes and to accommodate 3-hour passes. If that is much later in the year, it gives us another opportunity to keep this window wide for us to be able to get more comment. And so since all these things are fluid, this is what we're proposing today. So we have a choice in our recommendation from a staff perspective. We know this is not a big, broad dive that it could be. It's not possible to accomplish that during COVID. And our peers we see in public transit who are implementing fare changes are either implementing temporary changes or things which were completely grounded in data from before the pandemic. And so much clearly has changed in the pandemic. It's kind of it's a dicey move to make a big change there. So we could wait and come back for a big process, or we could push forward now with improvements that meet what people have requested of us and that we know for a fact will make a difference to the folks who are using us today, eliminating a transfer and going to rolling passes. We still have work to do. We still have more ticket vending machines to place. We have processes we can go through to make it easier to get day passes and rolling passes into various neighborhoods. And a lot of that work is predicated on the approval of this structure so we can move forward. So again, condensing, we seek your recommendation to take this item to the full board for approval to begin the outreach process starting next week. And I'm going to stop there because I've been talking a long time, but we can discuss any questions or any more information at your approval.
Hey, Catherine, I have a quick question on
Yes,
on the rolling passes, and maybe I misheard you. If somebody buys a 7-day rolling pass, does the 7 days start the day they buy it, or like when they tap it the first time?
Their first tap. Yes, ma'am. That's an excellent question. Okay. If you buy under this concept, you could buy a 7-day rolling pass today and put it in your niece or nephew's stocking in December, and they could wait until next March to use it, and it would be good for 7 days from there. So
okay.
It becomes a lot more convenient.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody else have any questions for Catherine before we introduce the resolution?
No questions.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to consider the resolution.
And I think Peter Schenk is reading the resolution.
And it's John. Hold on for a second.
Oh,
I was
sorry.
on mute. And you might have addressed this earlier. I had to step away for a couple of your initial slides. Is access addressed in all of this at all? I mean, where would that be addressed?
So access matches up to our fixed route fare for what we charge for paratransit, and that's the fare that we control. Since we're not touching the base fare, it does not increase the access fare.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is when we look at our base fare of $275 a trip, that's at the top end of what we see at U.S. transit systems. We would not recommend taking up these passes. We would not be bringing to a recommendation to take up the weekly or the monthly, because again, these reflect, they're based on a daily fare, which it's pretty high. So that's why we're not bringing forward those recommendations. We're just not at the point that it makes sense for us to take these recommendations forward.
Thank you. That's it, Ann.
All right. Any other questions from board members?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No questions.
Thank you. Like there's a slide that it's talking about.
Excuse me. Good morning. So I have a resolution for your authorization to proceed with the public comment period for the this actually should be 2022 fare policy change. It would be for fiscal 2022. And as Catherine mentioned, 2019, the authority did retain 4 nines to assist in gathering public input, reviewing other agencies' policies and structures, fair policies and structures, and to develop potential changes to the authority's policies and structures. Based upon this review, the authority is considering the following fair structure changes, which you will see in Exhibit A, which is attached. It would be the creation of 3-hour pass for a price of $2.75, the elimination of the $1 transfer, and also the elimination of the 25-cent stored value discount. And as Catherine mentioned, we would be introducing monthly and weekly passes and eliminating the calendar-based monthly and weekly passes except for the jobs for customers. This resolution would approve the public comment period for the dates listed of March 26th through May 5th, 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve or submit the resolution for approval at next week's board meeting?
So moved.
This is Jen. So moved. Or Jen will second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Pete, go ahead with the next one.
All right. The second resolution for your consideration is authorization to extend and amend the agreement with Brinks. Can I get the next slide, please? In October 2016, the authority issued a request for proposal in accordance with the board's adopted procurement policies for armored car and cash management services. In January of 2017, the board authorized a 3-year agreement with Brinks USA for a total not to exceed amount of $3.5 million, and that had 2 additional option years at the authority's sole discretion. Back in April 2020, the board exercised the first option year, which ran till May 4th of 2021, and increased the not to exceed amount to $4.268 million. The services performed by Brinks have been satisfactory under the agreement. The authority is requesting approval of the second option year, which would extend the time period to May 4th of 2022, and it would move the not to exceed amount up by $743,400 to a total of $5,012,000 even. Any questions regarding this resolution?
Okay.
And I had a question.
Okay, go ahead, John.
There's less cash in the system. Is that right, or am I wrong?
Yes, there's still bus cash that is picked up in the fare boxes and then brought to other locations throughout the system that ultimately is picked up and counted by Brinks USA.
What I was wondering about is the work less.
The work, I would say it's more efficient. I don't know who was around back when we had an internal cash room, but there were many a story, many of them in local media, where we would have barrels of cash sitting in the cash room uncounted for days and sometimes weeks. And so if you've ever been to the Brinks counting area, I mean, it's a highly mechanized system, and they're much more able to perform the cash counting procedures. I mean, this is their bread and butter. So I would say that there's no stories about cash not getting in our bank within a 24-hour period. So
okay, so the recommendation is really it's about how they do a much better job than we used to do.
Yes, I would say that.
All right. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to authorize sending this resolution to the board next week for approval?
This is
So
Jen,
moved.
so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Hey, Ann.
opposed? Yes.
Oh, I say it's Jerry. I apologize. I have to drop off the call. I have a work call at 9:30 that I can't miss. I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week. Okay, motion passes.
All right, I'll turn it over to Mike Cetra.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members. This resolution I have for the committee's consideration this morning would authorize Port Authority to enter into a second amendment with the Stadium Authority to extend the parties' existing agreement for free fares at the North Side T Station. Port Authority and the Stadium Authority originally entered into this agreement for a period of 5 years from April 1st, 2015 through March 31st, 2020. In November of 2019, the parties entered into a first amendment to the agreement to extend it 1 additional year from April 1st, 2020 through March 31st of this year. Since that time, clearly the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the use of the Stadium Authority's North Shore garages and lots has adversely and significantly impacted the ability of the Stadium Authority to continue to fund the North Side T Station free fare agreement, and that continues at this time with the ongoing impacts of the pandemic as to event gatherings and commuters coming to work downtown and on the North Shore. However, the Stadium Authority has confirmed that, but for the pandemic, it would be in a position to continue to fund this agreement. Port Authority is eligible to utilize its CARES Act and Supplemental CARES Act funding to reimburse its operating budget for lost revenues attributable to the pandemic. With these factors in mind, Port Authority and the Stadium Authority have negotiated a proposed second amendment, subject, of course, to Port Authority and Stadium Authority board approval, that would extend the agreement 1 more year from April 1, 2021 through March 31st of 2022 for a total funding amount of $265,000. However, the Stadium Authority's monthly payment obligation of that amount would not recommence unless and until its designated North Shore garages and lots reach a 90% utilization, average daily weekday utilization level for a period of 3 consecutive months. Unless and until that utilization level is reached, the agreement would provide that Port Authority would continue to reimburse its operating budget for the lost revenues via CARES Act funding. And I would just note for the committee's informational purposes, the designated lots that underwrite this agreement that Stadium Authority owns that are operated by Elko Parking currently are the Gold 1 Garage, the West General Robinson Street Garage, and North Shore lots 1, 2, and 6. And post-opening of the North Shore Connector in 2012 and pre-pandemic, the average weekday and special event utilization for these garages and lots was generally at 100% capacity or more. So we're hopeful, as you know, with recent orders, with event gatherings being increased here, that in the coming months we will see that utilization return and that payment obligation recommence. Subject to any member questions, I respectfully request that the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Do I have any questions from members? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to forward this to the board for next week for consideration?
This is Jen, so moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our final agenda item, Pete, is our February 2021 financial statements.
Thank you. So first, we'll have a review of the February financial results. The total operating income for the month was $5.5 million under budget, which is generally consistent with the previous month's results in total operating income. For the fiscal year, our total operating income is $44.7 million below budget, with all revenue categories reporting in at below budget. Our expenses for the month, $3.9 million under budget. The good news, all expense categories for the fiscal year are under budget. If this trend holds, the authority should not have to use any of the operating reserves that it had budgeted to balance the budget, and potentially use less of the CARES Act 1 funding than we had originally projected. Our subsidies for the month are $11.4 million under budget, and this is due to not recognizing any deferred revenue or local subsidy. Our subsidy for the fiscal year is $1.4 million over budget. Next slide, please. From a year-over-year perspective, our total operating income, $44.9 million below last fiscal year, and that's primarily due to the lower passengers revenue related to the impact of the pandemic. And we continue to invoice CARES Act 1 in order to address the shortfall. Our expenses year over year, $3.04 million higher than last fiscal year, principally due to higher expenses in wages and salaries, employee benefits, and also purchase service expense. Excuse me. Total subsidy, $36.5 million higher than last fiscal year, and that is principally due to the receipt of the CARES Act 1 subsidy that is offsetting the negative variance in the total operating income up above. Next slide, please. And then finally, our operating reserves. At the beginning of February, we had approximately $139.3 million in operating reserves. We had cash receipts from passenger revenues and subsidies of $34.2 million. Cash outflows related to payroll benefits and other services for the month were approximately $37 million. So the authority ended the month of February with $136.5 million in operating reserves. Any questions that I can answer?
I don't have any. Does any board member have a question? Feels like we're in a new normal. The numbers are staying kind of consistent now. Hopefully they'll.
Yeah, for the time being, but hopefully.
Hopefully trending upwards.
Things will improve.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. All right. That concludes our agenda for today. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We will see you next month. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move forward and call the meeting for the Performance Oversight Committee to order. Our first order of business this morning is our roll call. Representative Lori Magorski, are you still able to be on the phone with us?
Yes, Michelle, I'm still here.
Yay, good morning. Thank you. And Representative Austin Davis. I don't think he was going to be available, but Austin, were you able to join in? I'm going to take that as a no, and potentially he wasn't able to join us. So that's it for our roll call this morning. And other board members, if you're still on the phone call, could you please just quickly identify yourself?
John Tagg.
Ann O'Borick.
Jessica Walsville.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Moving forward to item number 2, approval of minutes for the February 18th, 2021 Performance Oversight Committee. Do we have any changes to that? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th, please, from Lori?
So moved.
I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Anne. And we are going to move forward then with the approval of those minutes. Item number 3, proposed resolutions. Good morning, Mr. Trona. How are you?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm fine, thank you. Committee members, good morning. I have 3 items for your review and approval for the full board. All 3 of these bids were publicly advertised and our electronic documents were distributed. The first is remanufactured exchange fuel injectors for our coaches. 3 firms accepted the invitation, 3 bids were received for these fuel injectors over a 1-year period. The low bidder did not meet the warranty requirements specified and therefore ineligible for award. The recommendation is that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, which was Cummins Inc. in the estimated amount of $622,944.60 over the 1-year period. This price represents an 11% increase for the previous contract price for these 1 year ago. The low bidder that did not meet the specifications, the warranty specifications in our contract was Muncie. The difference in their price to the awarded price is $116,000. Number 2, copier management services. 6 bids were received for this service over a 3-year period with 1 option period. The low bidder qualified their proposal by inserting their own terms and conditions, therefore ineligible for award. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, which was Canon Solutions America Inc. estimated amount of $332,908.80 over a 3-year term, including 1 option term. The low bidder in this situation was Konica Minolta. Their price was $157,000. The difference to the awarded price is $175,000. The other bids were in a range of $332,000 to as high as $463,000. So their low bid of $157,000 was particularly low in this situation. The price we're awarding at is a 3% decrease from the previous contracted price. Number 3 is LRV swivel rings. 3 firms accepted our invitation. 3 bids were received for these swivel rings over a 3-year period. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to CAF USA, estimated amount of $1,184,270.48 over a 3-year period. There's been no recent purchase of these parts. However, the staff has determined the price was fair and reasonable. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trona. Do any of our committee members have any questions or comments for Mr. Trona?
Yes, good morning. I have a couple questions. One is regarding the remanufactured fuel injectors. Is the purpose of utilizing remanufactured ones as a cost savings type of issue? And also, if you could excuse my ignorance, could you explain what the LRV swivel rings do?
Can we answer this? Would you please? Sure.
Good morning, Madam Board Member. This is Don Ravetti. On your first question about the reman fuel injectors, we purchased reman versus new. They are tested. They are a little bit cheaper than purchasing new. They are tested just like a new product, and we use those in tune-ups throughout the garages and engine overhaul in our main shop. The reman or the LRV swivel rings, that's a newer component that we've added, because in the past year we've revamped our truck overhaul for rail car trucks. So we're replacing those. They should help us not remove the truck again for 6 to 7 years, as long as the tire wear and other components that we've replaced last, allowing us to put those in the truck or in the rail car and leave them in there for the next 6 or 7 years, getting through the end of the life of most of the rail cars we have.
Don, what is a truck?
The truck is one of the three, thank you, boss. Truck is one of the 3 units underneath the rail car. There's 2 motor trucks and a center truck. So the trucks on each end drive the rail car, and the center truck helps support, and it just carries the weight in the middle.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mr. Trona or Don Ravetti? Any other board members have questions for either of these gentlemen on any of the 3 items? Hearing none, could I please have a motion to move this forward to the full board meeting next week?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Ann, are you still here?
Second.
Thank you, Ann. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries to the full board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our business for the day. And so could I have a motion to adjourn until our April meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Second, great. Okay, so performance oversight stands in adjournment. And I believe, does that conclude all of our business for the committee meetings this morning? Our technology meeting, I believe, was canceled afterwards.
You are correct. We are complete.
Okay, great. I believe that concludes our business for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.